Welcome back to another wonderful episode here on the Beyond Jaws podcast. On today's episode, we are following the career of Adriana Gonzalez-Pestana, who is talking about her life moving around from Peru and now into Australia, going and doing her PhD, talking about what she has done in Peru, how she was one of the first shark biologists there and be able to do a lot of stuff there, come out with a book for children, be able to talk about conservation, and then move and to do a PhD in Australia. We talk about everything in that, and it's going to be exciting. So let's hear it. Let's start the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lewin, here with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert. David, are you ready to talk about, I know this is one of the people that you mentor, and this is a special episode to hear about her career really just beginning. How excited are you?
Oh, I'm really excited, Andrew. I mean, she's really one of the rising stars in the field, and I think, and she's getting around, really working in different areas, and as she talks about, she just pursuing her passion. She went and did she really exploring the whole shark world in Peru. She didn't really have any guide or mentor initially when she started out, and now she's gone on to Australia. We'll talk about some of the different countries she's been involved with, some of the important shark and ray areas with the IUCN. She's just an amazing person, and you look at all of her accomplishments that she's had. She's also got a good publication record. She just did her first book. She's very involved with the communities. It's just a fascinating person. I really just can't say enough good things about Adriana. She's just really one of these rock stars really in the field. She's just really out there doing stuff.
100%.
And she's extremely accomplished, and I'm really, really happy to have her as a friend. And I'm really been able to mentor her and hopefully pass along a lot of knowledge and stuff to her as she really gets her career up and going. And so I really hope people enjoy this episode. She's just we've had a number of these really young up and coming people on the podcast, and I'm hoping that in the future they'll come back 10, 20 years from now and listen to them again and see where they are. And,
absolutely.
So I'm really looking forward to this and this interview today. So
that's going to be a great time. Enjoy this interview with Adriana Gonzalez-Pestana, talking about her career in shark science. Enjoy, and we'll talk to you after. Hey, Adriana, welcome back to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to talk about sharks?
Yes, I'm super excited to be here again.
I love it. Love it.
Well, we want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast, where we have a real rising star in the shark world with an absolutely awesome guest. We have Adriana Gonzalez-Pestana, who's currently working on her PhD at Charles Darwin University. Adriana is a coastal marine ecologist and conservation who was born and raised in Lima, Peru. And her graduate and undergraduate research projects were on the trophic ecology, nursery, and habitat suitability of juvenile smooth hammerhead sharks off northern Peru. For the past decade, she's been involved in the conservation of endangered sharks and ray species through education and research, and she's published already 30 scientific publications, and recently she just published her first book, which we'll talk about today. She's involved as a regional scientific coordinator in the global project for the Shark Specialist Group, the IUCN, Important Sharks and Rays Areas, ISRA. So conservation is really where a lot of her focus is these days. Adriana is also an adjunct professor at the University Científica del Sur, where she teaches future marine biologists. Her PhD research proposal focuses on understanding how citizen science can be used in the identification and monitoring of critical shark habitat in the Western Pacific. She's formerly an expeditionary on an Antarctic survey crew, and she was recognized nationally as an outstanding young conservationist, and she's received many grants through her work to support her research and her education. She uses outdoor science-based activities and storytelling to promote environmental identity in children from coastal communities. She recently published a children's book, as I mentioned, we'll talk about today, that connects children specifically from fishing communities with the marine ecosystem. She's a passionate diver and nature photographer, and she was actually on episode 12 back in December of 2021. We had a series from the Global Wedge Fish and Guitarfish Symposium, and she subsequently published a paper from that symposium. And she's also one of the featured early career researchers on the new documentary series, Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive, which is now on YouTube, and we will be talking about that. As I mentioned, she's currently a PhD student at Charles Darwin University, but before that, she did her Bachelor's of Science at the University Scientifica del Sur and a Master's of Science at the James Cook University. And with that, Adriana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for that presentation. It has been a journey working with sharks and rays in the last decade or so, and I'm very excited to share that with everyone here. And thank you very much for having me here as well.
Great.
You bet.
Well, as we ask all of our guests, Adriana, how did you get interested in the marine environment and in sharks and rays?
It was a long journey for me. It didn't happen from one day to the other, but I always have a very strong connection with the ocean. I live in Lima, so Lima it's a huge desert. There's not much nature on land, alive nature at least. So I always have this great connection with the ocean. We spend the holidays on beautiful beach town called Totoritas, where I fell in love with the ocean since I was like 5, 6 years old. Then I have read a lot that there's a critical point in everyone's life between 6 and 12 years old. If you're exposed to nature in positive ways regularly without any adult supervision, it's like 99% you're going to fall in love with the ocean. I think that's the key for conservation on the long term. So I was exposed to those moments, special moments with nature. I was like those children that were by themselves with their friends, just like climbing rocks, like jumping into the ocean. I don't know how I ever get, nothing happened to me because I was exposing myself to kind of extreme, no, like all risk and all adventure, and that was key for me to feel like this strong spirituality. I would say that it was a strong connection, more it was spiritual, for sure it was that. And I felt like I was belonging to this perfect world, where I was completely accepted by nature, and I was in awe all the time, inspired by it. So I think that was the main thing that even today, and that's why I want to give back when I do work with fishery communities, try to bring them back to nature, and they have that chance. I think that's the key for conservation, that children have that experience regularly when they're growing up. So yeah, that was how I fell in love with the ocean. As I say, when I finished high school, there was no marine biology career. I was this close to go to study overseas. My dad was very supportive. And I did start engineering forestry at that time because that was the closest I could get to nature. I didn't have anyone to look for as a marine biologist in Peru, And at that time, I didn't know like Sylvia Earle. There was not that many. I couldn't see that much examples of people working in marine biology, especially in Peru, because there was no that career. And when I was this close to go to study to Costa Rica, I was very excited. They opened for the first time the career in Peru. So my dad was like, "You're staying," and I was like, "No, I want to go to Costa Rica." I was kind of disappointed, no? Costa Rica, is like this beautiful country with a lot of nature. But then I'm super glad that things turned that way because it was a huge opportunity, In every place where nothing is it's done, and Dave, you always talk about this, the unknown track. There's so much space for discovery, for exploration, and then of course to have this purpose for my country that has nothing, that they have very limited information. And yeah, so that's why I finished studying marine biology. I was like 24 when I started a career. I was pretty, usually people start 18 because I had this background in engineering forestry. But when I did find marine biology, I was those students that would like have super grades. I want to know more than a teacher could give me. I was like, have this hunger for knowledge and exploration. So I'm happy it came up when I was more mature later in my life.
And so you went through, you did because it was there wasn't really many people had done a lot in Peru. And so when you started you're doing your research and get your undergraduate degree, what was sort of your next step then?
So I studied marine biology, and we did have good professors, but it was more related to fisheries. So we do have the career for fisheries, but it's a different aim and perspective compared to marine biology. And during the career, I did meet women, especially like Joanna Alfaro, Jimena Velez, that were doing conservation, but I was more when I was into the career later on. And but I have no. If you would tell me when I was on my second, third year of marine biology, in Peru it's 5 years the degree, that I will finish working with sharks, I will say there's no way, not even in my wildest dream, I will ever imagine that I was going to end up with that. So I think kind of it was kind of a for me it was like a miracle how it all happened. It was very special because I was like more interested like in jellyfish, in nudibranch, like very completely different creatures. And then I went for do internship in the Galapagos Island on my third, I think fourth year of career, my summer. I tried to go every summer somewhere else. Galapagos one of the first overseas that I did internships. But I as well no idea about sharks. I was like most people afraid of them, jaws, teeth. I have no idea about their situation, that they were vulnerable and in extinction. And in that trip, my boss, Eduardo Espinosa, was a shark addict. Like he was also a scientist and he was all about sharks. And that passion that he had, he gave that to me. And of course, the key thing was diving with them underwater. I remember my
Mm.
first time. I think it was the third day I arrived. I stayed like 3 months in Galapagos in that internship,
Wow.
and we were with a new friend that we made, and we were just having snorkeling, very shallow waters, I think 1, 2 meters. And he was, stop, don't move. There's a shark below you. And I was like, don't move. Okay, it's going to attack me. So I was like, I thought that was why he was saying don't move. And then
Right.
I realized that it was this nurse shark just laying very, what they do, rest on the bottom.
Yeah.
And I realized that that shark was not going to do anything. And as the months and the weeks went by, I had the chance to dive with many different species of sharks in the Galapagos. And by the end, I was so enthralled by them that I wanted to dive fast to see them closer. And sharks actually ran away from me because they could feel my intensity. No, they're very, very sensitive animals. And they can perceive you very easily. So that experience was for me like falling in love. It was love at first sight. That's the best description I can give from that moment. And from that day on, they have been my main purpose, for this passion to try to understand them. And with that came all that knowledge about their vulnerable situation. So it made fit my role as a researcher and then as an educator later on while working with fishery communities in northern Peru. uh, that was my
So,
purpose
so,
in
so
that.
you're really kind of a really like a trailblazer because there really wasn't anybody doing really any much dedicated shark research before
Ye-
you. They're fish people, and we've had like Joanne Alfaro and Jimena on the show, and but they didn't really start off as sharky people per se. They kind
Yeah,
of
they were working more turtles because turtles gather our attention early on because they were very endangered as well, and marine mammals
hmm
Right.
was the main focus when people start working in marine biology in Peru. But yeah, because through that experience, I went back to Peru and I was like, okay, let's see what's going on in Peru. And by that time, I also met Jimena, who was doing her PhD on genetics on sharks along Latin
right.
America, the Eastern Pacific coast. And it was great to meet her at that time of my life because I wanted to do things for sharks in Peru. I couldn't find information about them. There was basically some fisheries data, but very not even analyzed, like just data that Peruvian Institute managed, and that was it. There was like almost nothing. So with Jimena, we decided to start working on that, and they make like a baseline of what was the fishery situation, what species were the most caught, and that for me was super important because first of all, give me a clear path of where to go. Okay, I'm going to just start like filling this gap of information, and once I have this baseline, I can just decide which will be the next steps for research. That took me to my undergrad thesis that was focused on the smooth hammerhead shark. That is the one we discovered that it was one of the most caught species and the most caught species in northern Peru for nursery areas. So I decided to do my undergrad based on that research that we did with Jimena.
Uh,
So having models early on especially woman in my case, because I'm a woman, and it's hard to picture yourself doing something no one else has done it. Interestingly, these days, most women, early researchers or even students that are doing volunteers or working in sharks are most women in Peru, which
Mhm.
is great because we come from a country where there's a high violence and a lot of stereotypes with women. But
Hmm.
it's great to see that most are just women working with sharks. I think that's amazing.
Why do you think that is?
I think there's several reasons. We have a lot more marine biologists, women than men. It's probably because still a lot of stereotypes men need to provide. No, and marine biology is not a career that you're going to make millionaire. It's like
That's
more
true.
living your passion. You can also make it economically sustainable. So I think for women, there's less pressure to feed a career that they need to provide money. And second, because I think there's more role models in Peru, women that are doing research. The
Oh,
ones that
really?
start doing research are women like me, Jimena, and then we have also worked with Joanna. So if you see a lot of women doing shark research, then it's
Yeah.
easy to gather more women to follow that path.
What I got? Well, Peru does have one claim to fame as far as in shark research, and I think the first time I met you about 10 years ago in person, I asked you if you knew Norma Chirichingo,
And we have Norma, yes.
and you
Uh-huh.
did know her, and she's just for people don't know her, she was the first woman to describe a new species of shark or ray back in 1963.
Oh,
and
wow.
uh, and so and when I first met Adriana, this was about 10 years ago at a FAO workshop. It was one of the first. It wasn't one of the first questions I asked you if you knew Norma, and you and said and
I
Norma had
wish,
written.
I wish I knew her. But I remember
Yeah,
clearly that day when you told me that, and I was like, "What? The first woman ever to describe a shark and ray species? That's a record, and it's from Peru."
yeah,
I know she's this small lady with this huge personality. Like she's like doesn't stop. I know she's retired now, but she has done so much for the fish world in general. She's
Yeah.
like a legend in Peru. We
yeah. Well,
should one
she
day go and meet her before she leaves this world.
right. Yeah. Well, she wrote the Fishes of Peru back originally, I think in the 70s. I think the first edition. And I'd actually read, I think, a second edition back in the 1980s when I was a graduate student. So, because my professor, we had to learn all about ichthyologists around the world, and she was one of the names that came up. And then when I did later research, I realized, as far as I could tell, she was the first woman to describe a new species of shark or ray. And so, anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. That was the first
Yeah.
time I met you, and then went to Peru. That was kind of
That's
something
pretty
that could
amazing.
really be pretty nice to show out there. So anyway, so that was pretty neat. So how did you end up in? You went up you when you came back and you did all this other stuff. You went up to northern Peru. Was it
Yeah.
just because of the smooth hammerheads, or what brought you up to northern Peru?
Well, I have never been a fan of big cities. I live in a 10, 11 million person population city.
Population, yeah.
So I wanted to run away from it and be like, because I studied 5 years marine biology, but it was all books. So I was so eager to get into the field, to have all that experience that I have in Galapagos now, more like in touch with
Hmm.
the reality. So I moved to northern Peru, and that was like a blow my mind experience because I had the chance to basically be close to the fishermen. When I was in Galapagos, I was like, fishermen are my enemy. They're killing sharks. This is terrible. I have to stop it. But when you're very young and innocent.
Hmm.
So I went there and I discovered a different situation. These fishermen, they ended up being my friends, and I spent so
Mm.
many hours on the board. I didn't have any money when I started, of course. I had my father's support, his blessing, go and do your stuff, but I don't have money not to support you on all these projects. So I started as an early career scientists applying for these small grants that were like the first one I got. I remember was the Patty Foundation. It was not that much money, but I was so excited. I was going to change the world with 1,000 USA dollars. And that's something that's all you need because you have all this energy and this dedication. So
100%.
with that, I get to move to northern Peru for the whole summer. I spent like, well, the last 7 years I have spent on and off in northern Peru. But that first time, I went to a very small fishery town where there was like, I didn't knew anyone, and I was very attracted to that situation, no, to knowing what was going on, and I understood what was the main reason. They were not mean people; they were just fathers and daughters and sons that were living their lives, and they was their livelihood, no, and I understand that the only way I could change it is to just observe, don't criticize, just try to understand from their perspective why it's going on, to try to make something that works for everyone. It's very hard, no, and I think we have changed a lot. People used to come to a place and say, this is bad, you need to do it this way, and they never asked the local people what they want, how they can make it improve. And there's a lot of, like, education is very limited in these places. I remember fishermen, they were catching baby hammerhead hares, and they didn't even know that that could become a 2-3 meter adult.
Mm.
So it was very basic information they have. There was no government presence. So it was a very good experience to understand it from their perspective, to see how this can be changed. And that's where I start working with children as well in these fishery communities.
So did you set up now? Did you set up like your own like little organization, like your own little nonprofit organization up there?
No, I still don't have it. I was working more like an independent researcher, collaborating with other persons. For
Okay.
example, I have a close friend who started an NGO for education for children, to bring them outdoors. So that was a key time for me, and that's where I met Kathy. Well, I re-met Kathy, that is my co-author in the children's book that was during that
Hmm.
time we were working with children in fishery communities. So yeah, that's a good thing about living being in, like, for example, in Australia, I see it's so much harder to make research as an independent researcher, because you need to be affiliated with a big institution and you have all these
Hmm.
permits. That it's great, of course you need that, but in places like Peru, you can just be more informal in that way, but you have more opportunities to just be out there and collect data and and be in touch with that.
Well,
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
I think too because there was Australia has a lot of people doing sharks and rays there now they do. You go back when I started out 35 40 years ago in the 1980s. There was basically John Stevens, Peter Last, and a couple other people. There was not that many people there. Colin Simpfendorfer early on, but there was not very many people, and that's sort of like you. But once you start getting a lot more people involved doing it, then you start having more regulations and having to do different things, which I probably Peru will get there. Unfortunately, if you get as more people get into the shark world, doing stuff
Yeah.
is be my guess. But it sounds like it was a wild. It was pretty. The nice thing it seems like I can relate to is you had like there was no sort of path. You basically just blaze your own trail, basically like You're basically like a pioneer, an explorer.
Yes, and I think that's fascinating, and I always remember those days as very important early on. They build my character. I remember the first time I went on a trip with fishermen from northern Peru. I remember that day that I told my mom that I was going to go on a journey for. I didn't know how long it was going to last, because it depends how much catch they get to come back. And my mom was just crying. Why are you going to do this to me? We have to call your dad. And my dad was like, he didn't want to say the awful word that would be the worst case scenario, but he was like, Adriana, what are you doing? This is insane. And I was like, my dad's no. When I have my mind decided, there's nothing they can do. They could chain me to the bed. That's the only way they could. Where they knew I had my mind was like, because I was longing for the moment, because I was spent so much time on the landing site seeing all these sharks
Yeah.
come there. I wanted to go to the ocean and have the experience to be out there. It was still very sad because they were catching sharks, but
Right.
it was one of the most fascinating experience I ever had. I remember I had one. I'm very like adventurous, and I'm usually not afraid. But in that trip, I have a panic attack. I have two panic attacks in my life, and that was the first one that I got, because I remember I didn't know the fisherman. I was at that time working in Pro Delfinos, and they work with fishermen. Nothing has happened there always the nicest persons,
Right.
but still they were
Yep.
strangers for me. And I was going, a woman by himself with four men on a boat, on an artisanal boat, a small boat,
Yeah.
for many days. At the end we were like 13 days overseas, but then we were so far away on the ocean that we even get to international waters.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 2 days we were just traveling from the coast to the fishery area, and I realized on the second day that it was obvious, but the second day when I have no internet phone, nothing to communicate, we still have the pilot, how do you call it, pilot captain? He still
Hmm.
have a radio to
Oh,
communicate
Right.
with.
Yeah.
yep.
We have that. It was not completely, but I didn't have my phone or nothing, and I was like, oh my god, I'm here in this tiny boat with five men that I don't know, and we're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and I had a panic attack, and I started throwing up. I never get dizzy on the
Oh
ocean,
no.
never. I usually get like very relaxed, but I was throwing
Yeah.
up like this, like the last stage when.
Is-
And I told myself, Adriana, you have put yourself in this situation. You are the only one who can get out of it. Because they were looking at me like, oh, what are we going to do with this girl? We're 2 days far away from land. There was
yeah.
not that much choice.
There's nothing. You
But
can't
yeah,
go
Yeah.
back. You can't go back.
yeah.
Uh,
And they spent so much money to get out there as well. It was going to be expensive.
and
Yeah.
just for people that hear in the podcast, we're gonna have some pictures up for this episode. You can see when she's talking about these artisanal boats. These are not very.
No,
These are
they
just
don't have
these.
bathrooms. They're
Nope.
very,
Yeah.
very basic. I remember I spent 2 days holding myself peeing
Oh
because
my
I was like,
gosh.
where am I going to go peeing? And just
For
peeing,
2 days?
not pooping. I'm not even talking about pooping. I was 13 days with no bathroom, like nothing.
Yeah.
But they were such gentlemen. So I understood I
Right.
have to tell them, I'm going to the bathroom. So they all look like this.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
never came
Yeah.
down. So I went to the other side. I put my butt outside the boat, and that was it. Yeah, it was very extreme situation. I put
I
myself
can
in.
imagine.
So,
But
so
build my character for sure.
Yeah, so as all the young students out there that are just starting out, particularly the women, just listen to the story, play it back on the podcast, and listen to what she just explained. 13 days at sea with five men in international waters and no bathroom. Just imagine that.
But you know
So
what? Peru is not the safest place for women. We have records in rapists and all that. But
Right.
fishermen, at least the one that I have worked, they're the most gentle man ever. I remember every time they make the food and they have great make food, I was the first one to get the biggest plate. Every time I have to go pee, they never pick. Like they treat me
Right.
like a princess, like
Yeah.
very,
They took
very.
care of you.
I felt very, very safe.
yeah, that's
That's
great.
good.
That's
That's really
really
nice
that's
to know.
good. It's very really nice to hear. I bet after that, they probably when you went back to the fishing ports, there they probably had a lot of respect for you as far as being able to get
Yes, I
that.
remember they respect me on another level because fishermen in Peru, most of them, they don't know how to swim.
Oh,
They are
really?
very scared about the ocean in itself. And one day when we were like very, very far away, you could tell how you were in offshore oceanic water because of the color of the water. And the
Hmm.
birds were very different. So I told them, I need to jump. And those fishing
Oh
boats are
my
not built to
gosh.
jump. They're to stay in the boat and never get out when you go in the landing side. So like, what? Like, are you jumping? No, 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 no. We need to put you a rope. So I put my wetsuit on. They put me a rope, on my wrist, and they let me jump. And they were like, "What is she doing? She's going to be like enthralled by a sea creature and never come back." So I think after that, they looked me with different eyes as well.
Like we have to watch her. We have to really watch her. She's gonna drown, the poor
she's
girl.
she's crazy.
Yeah. We can't keep
that
up with her.
yeah that is and so how much of the story did you share with your parents when you got home?
I think, yeah, my mom it's always like that with my mom. She's super worried when I tell her the news. Once I leave, she just forgets. So
Yeah.
Right.
that's good because you will be like a nightmare for her for those 13 days. But I do remember she told me that I told her I was coming back on the sixth day. And on the 6 days, I knew that we were going to stay much longer. So I asked the captain to send a message back to her. And and she got someone like she never knew from the port, from the port, called her, and she was like, "Señora Juliana." And I'm like, yes. And she knew it was about me. Your daughter, it's all right. She will come back on the next 3 months. And that was it.
And that was it.
What that meant, she only knew that I was safe and I was coming back eventually. So,
That's all she needed to know. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man! So was that your what? Did you ever go out with them again, or was that your one trip?
No, I have been out in other fishing trips, but never as that extreme. I don't know if I still have the GPS points, but I was in international waters. So I was
Yeah,
very far away at some point from the coast. And I think that's the most extreme. And it was the first one as
yeah,
well.
yeah. So that gave. Well, I got the other question. Did you get a lot? Were you able to collect a lot of data on sharks while you're out there, at least? To
Yeah,
listen.
it was sad as well because I get to see the sharks when they came in, and they throw these very long nets because I think as less resources they are, fishermen try to have a higher fishing effort. So in Peru, we are managing this. We started with 1 kilometer, now three. I think now it's 5 or 7.
Hmm.
But it's all very manual. It's such a hard job as well to throw all these
Yeah,
really long, and they have to collect them back every morning. So I was helping them to pulling the nets off, and then we got a lot of treasure sharks, of blue sharks, of hammerheads, manta rays. So it was very sad, and I did participate on the. They had these huge knives, and the boat was moving like
Mhm.
this, all full with blood, with these huge knives trying to eviscerate them, and I was part of all that process. And I did
That's
collect
hard.
a lot of. It
That's hard
was
to watch,
hard, but
eh?
yeah,
yes, it was very sad. But then you get to see how much they work and how little they earn. Like I remember that after 2 weeks they were earning like $100 per person, and like a huge mobula was worth like $2. Like, come on, like we need
Wow.
to change this. These people are doing it because there's their livings and they have inherited there from generations to generations, so very
Right.
attached to that. But they're not making that much money for
mhm.
all that hard work. Um,
and,
but
and
yeah,
they and they have a lot of other. I know when I was there with you and we were doing the series. That the other things we was real striking was that they have things like piracy out in the seas. They have the drug cartels. They have local, you know, gangster mobs at the various ports there. It's not an easy life to be a fisherman there.
no, where I am, I was okay. There was no piracy, but closer to the frontier with Ecuador, and now actually recently they have a journal went there, and it was like a lot of people have been killed on the last 3 years because of pirates,
Yeah.
Mm.
and they just go and they don't matter, they don't anything, they will just take whatever, and
Hmm.
life doesn't is worth for them. So it's a hard job, and
Yeah.
fishermen are also very attached to that lifestyle. You cannot bring a fisherman to work on a factory, they will kill themselves. They need that adventure, that sense of risk. That's like why Galapagos was a great example, because you have fishermen that are now park rangers
Hmm.
because it fits their way of living.
Right, because they want to be
They're
at sea.
wild men. Yeah, they're wild men, and they really
Hmm.
enjoy doing what they do. It's amazing to be on the
Yeah.
ocean every single day, but it
Yeah.
is a hard job, and it's very bad pay, because then you see how much that thing got sold on another part of the world. Like, who is making all that money? So it
Hmm.
makes you question about the ethics about the whole
Yeah.
seafood
Well,
trade.
the other thing too is talking to those fishermen too. You probably, I know of my own experience, you learn a lot talking with the guys because they're out there all the time, and they see, as much as you like to be out there, you can't be out there all every day unless you become a fisherwoman or something. But those guys see a lot of stuff, and they can tell you about what they're catching, what they used to catch, um, and everything. And so they got a lot of fisher knowledge, I guess, which I think is important, and it's something I think a lot of people overlook in terms of
It's
talking to
key.
fish.
I think in most of underdeveloping countries, like in the case of Peru, all my research has been based in their knowledge and in collaboration, because they bring the samples back. If there was no fishery, we wouldn't be able to study them. It's so expensive if you don't have money to just rent a boat and
Right,
go to
right,
see sharks. It's through their through their way of life and through their knowledge that you can gather all that information. So I'm very helpful. They have been very helpful, and I'm very grateful for all the knowledge they have been to me, for sure.
So, so you're spending all this time up in northern Peru, going out with the fishermen and going everything. Did you have at that time? Did you have um, any overall goal you were looking at that point in time? Because this is before you. I think this is before you even really went and did your master's, correct? Or?
It was before. It was just when I finished my undergrad, I moved northern Peru, and I have stayed there for many years. So I started focusing on smooth hammerheads because there's one of the largest nursery areas in the Eastern Pacific. But then whatever I could check, like rays, oh, there's rays, oh, there's like hound sharks, no? So whatever, guitar fishes, so whatever I could put my hands on, I started collecting data because I knew there was nothing. So it was key, and they were get fished, no? For example, the guitar fish that we did a few years ago, the symposium, I did like a literature review, and it was so sad that today we fish 2% of what was once caught on the 80s. So on the 80s was the peak that we know because we have data from the 50s. And now we catch 2%. So what's left? And that species has been caught for millennia, even pre-Inca, like before Christ, has been important for the culture. They have like these plates. They move the guitar fish all around to the highlands, to the jungle. So it was a very important part of the culture, and now it's almost gone compared to how it was. And yeah, in the 60s, probably when you went to Bahia Sechura Bay, you probably wouldn't be able to walk because they were on top of each other. And now you have so few, and people are not even, the government and many people are not even realizing what we're losing.
What
Hmm.
what doing all this stuff is this what kind of inspired you to do your children's book that you just came out?
Of course. Yeah. So at the time it was a very intense time of my life where I was living in northern Peru, was starting my first research with a fisherman on smooth hammerheads. And I have a very close friend who was also starting an NGO for environmental education with children. And a key person at that point in my life was Katy. So this is the book, and she's
Yep.
one of the co-authors. So Katy is a very special person in my life because she used to be the person who take care of me when I was little.
Okay.
So those summers that I was in Totoritas having fun, she used to take care of me. She was also younger. She was like 16 years old. So she was probably her vacations in high school.
Hmm.
And her mom used to work for my grandmother. So we have like
Okay.
transgenerational relationship.
So
Generational
she's
connection.
basically like family to you at this point.
Yes, of course, she's like family. So she didn't, at that time, she was like 16 years old. With us, she discovered that she loves children. So after that, she studied to become a teacher.
Nice.
So she was a great influence when I was little because she was like, "You are not a happy children if you're not dirty. Where's the mat?" She
I
was like
love
that,
it.
no? Like, yeah, like that. That's how like everyone who takes care of children should embrace them to be wild and no and forget about king. Just go and do your wild stuff. So she was like that all the time. And then when I was passed and by, we went through different paths. She studied. She worked with children. Uh, and I was in northern Peru, so I invite her to become part of this NGO because she was the only one who was actually an educator professionally,
Mm.
and she's amazing with children. She's those person that she just need to look at the children into the eye and the children will behave. she has this power with
Commands
them.
respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bring her to where I was working. I bring them to the landing site, and she was like, "Adri, this is so sad. Like we need to do something." So together we start developing this children's book. And at the time I was also working with the children from the fishery communities. So that's how the story started to develop. So this story is basically, as you can see, it's about the smooth hammerhead. So it's basically the story of, I will show you a little bit. The story
Yep.
starts when mom and dad are saying goodbye somewhere of the Pacific Ocean. Mom, of course, is pregnant, and she arrives to this beautiful place in northern Peru. Actually, this is the place where close to the island that I went the first time I went fishing with the fisherman. So
Hmm.
she
Okay.
arrives to this very productive ecosystem to give birth, and she gives birth. And then, of course, there's the fisheries. So the book doesn't ever mention the nets, it's just a shadow. So these two little children, baby sharks, start like looking for their mom, and they met all these characters. You can still see the parts of the shark.
Mhm.
So they start looking for their mom, where the shadow has taken her. So they needed
Mm-hmm.
a mako shark, the treasure, the blue shark,
Oh, cool.
and they
That's
decided
awesome.
to make this hidden place. That's why El Escondite in Spanish it's a hidden place to escape
Okay.
from humans.
Mhm.
But then the connection comes back because there's this marine biologist. I'll show you here, and that's how they met again to rebuild that
Uh,
lost connection between the marine world. I'm not going to tell you the end, but it's a story about the impacts that
Spoiler alert.
yeah, it's the impacts that human had on sharks, especially overfishing is the main threat in the marine world. We all know that.
Mhm.
And how sharks decided to just leave humans and hide on this place. But then humans were starving because there was no fishery, and the sharks were like overpopulating this hidden place. So they need to come back to regain this equilibrium between the human world and the ocean world. So yeah, the book was basically to try to educate. I'm a big um, champion of we need to invest more in education. It's always going to be on the long term, but I think it's the only sustainable way to get where we want to be.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Now did you finally? I know you had that book done. Who did the illustrations for the book, by the way? Did you, a friend of yours?
Marcos Torres, no, Gatti was the one because Gatti did a master's in children literature. So when
Uh
she
huh.
was doing that
Okay.
master, she met the illustrator. He
Okay.
is an amazing person, and he works basically with children's book. You can
Okay.
tell like how the characters are all these
Yeah.
personification of humans. He did a great job. So yeah, he
Right.
was the key person to
Yeah.
do the drawings.
And I know I know when we talked when I was down in South America and we were doing the series we'll talk about here. How did you how did you get funding for the to get to print the books for the kids?
It has been a 10-year project, on and off,
Wow.
sleeping
10
a lot of
years.
time because we were doing other stuff. And I
Yeah.
got the funding for that. Like, we was all basically me and Kathy putting all this energy. We got a little funding from Ruford Foundation to
Hmm.
pay for the illustrator. And
Mm-hmm.
then at the end, we decided to print ourselves with our own money
Okay.
because we just wanted to see it alive. It couldn't
Yeah.
stay
Yeah.
on the computer that longer. It was too long. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
sometimes you have to bet for yourself. If I have the money, Kathy had the money. Kathy now lives in Germany and she works with children.
hmm
So we come together, say, let's make it alive. If we need to put our money, let's do it. And I don't
yeah.
regret it. It will come back, and the whole point is just to share this. So the
Yeah.
idea is just for every book that it gets sold, especially in Lima, where people have higher capacity to spend money, a book goes to a fishery community. We're starting with northern Peru, but the idea is to go all along the coast because those are the children who need that information. We went on December to give books as a donation to the fishery community where this project started when I started doing my research as well. And this picture, I made it just like it never says Peru in the whole book, but for me, the most that you can tell is Peru is because of the ecosystem. We were very perfectionist with Marcos. Marcos, this doesn't look
Yeah.
like this species. You need to put this and that. So this
hmm
is the island that is called Lobos de Tierra, Lobos de Afuera. That is a very special place. It's like the Galapagos, we will say, of Peru, where there's a huge amount of different species of sharks aggregating there. When we did a presentation of the book in northern Peru, I was like, this is Nuevos de Tierra. So excited, the island. And they were like, what's that? I never heard that place before. And I was like, oh my God, these children will become fishermen one day and they don't even know this island. It's not visible from the coast. You need to get
Right.
into a boat. But
Yeah.
that level of lack of environmental culture identity they have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I,
makes me more engaged to bring that message to them.
that that's really an amazing story. Just you're so passionate about this and connecting with the kids that you and Kadia just basically self funded the whole thing. If there's anybody out there listening that has some money wants to help further the cause, please contact Adriana. I'm sure they got plenty of children in northern Peru would like to still get copies of that book. They may do another print run.
Yeah, we're going to work. The idea is to work with the schools in Lima. So we want to work with the schools instead of working with the children directly, because the
Right.
story has so much message that it will be much
Right.
more
Of
efficient
course.
to work
Hmm.
through institution education. So yeah, we're getting
Yeah.
there little by little. I know it's a project, it will last 10 years and it's going to last, and
Yeah.
we want to make more books, so this is just a beginning.
that that
Have you thought about selling some of the books on a bigger platform, like internationally, for other Spanish speaking countries, so that they can get not only an idea of Peru but just on the books, and then use that money to fund the books for the kids and or for the schools.
Yes, the book, although was based in Peru, most of the species are worldwide, like the mako, the blue shark, the
Yeah.
hammerheads. And it's the same story repeats over and over again all over the world, like overfishing.
Yeah.
It's the same story. And yes, the idea is to translate her in start with English, German, since Kathy is working there. And
Right.
yeah, we want to grow, but I'm doing my PhD. Kathy's
Yeah, it's a
working
little
full
busy.
time.
yeah.
So it will go slowly. I don't have any pressure to make it big from one day to
Right.
another, and I still have my life to work on that.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the idea. We want to keep working on that, work in Lima, like go to the fishery communities, and then expand to other places.
Yeah.
Right
Well, so
on.
why don't you talk a little about what's your about your PhD project? Are you still working on your proposal, or where are you at with that now?
I started 1 year ago, will be by the end of March. So it's 3 years in Australia. It's so fast. So I have been like trying to move forward as fast as I can every single week. So yeah, it got approved last year on November, the confirmation of candidature. So the project is more based on, because I start very focused in Peru, but on the last 2 years I have been working for this international project that is run by the IUCN Shark Specialist Group. So it's basically a project that is mapping critical shark habitat
Let,
all around the world.
let's
Oh
just talk
wow.
about, maybe just we'll come back to your thesis. Why don't you talk a little bit about this? This is the ISRA, which is
It's
important shark.
related.
Right.
Yeah.
You what?
Mm.
Yeah. So why don't you just talk about that a little bit, and we'll come back to your PhD, how that's kind of interrelated.
Actually, the book is based on an ISRA because we
Oh, it
have
is.
reproductive areas where the shark, mother comes in and gives birth. We have feeding areas where the sharks are eating humble squid. So yeah, ISRA basically is important shark and ray areas. So these are places that are important for sharks for critical life stages, like reproduction, feeding, movement as well, resting, where's high diversity or a lot of endangered species. So all these places are being mapped on a global scale, region by region. So I was lucky enough, I think so. Some things are in your cards, I think so. Um, because they opened this position to work on, they were just starting to map these areas. And the first region was the Eastern Pacific, from Mexico to Chile. And I remember applying, and then I was like being very ambitious, of course, but I was like, oh, I want to really be part of this team. That sounds amazing. And the leader of the project said me, okay, we feel in the position you were, but we might be still interesting because we're starting in your region and we need someone from that region.
Right.
So that's why I got the job, and it has been such a great adventure. A lot of hard work, of course, that comes with that, but it's great because you get to know basically the whole world. You go region by region and you understand what is the ecosystem about, the habitats, the different species that each region has. And very interesting, you get to know the people behind those, because we're not going on a boat looking for those habitats. It would be great, but it will take decades. We're working with the regional experts. So, for example, in the first region, we invited around 30 persons to this workshop to identify critical habitats. So it's great because you also get to know the people behind all this research, and all of them are very passionate about their work. So it's amazing. You really build a good network of contacts around the world.
Yeah.
So that's how I started with the ISRA project. And then from that, I decided to do my PhD based on that project.
Hmm.
So I have moved from Peru to Australia, and now my focus of research is the Indo-West Pacific.
Hmm. So what?
And I have one chapter that is going to be more based on the field for Timor-Leste, that Dave
Hmm.
is my advisor.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the areas. Yeah, Timor-Leste is one of the ones we've talked a little bit about that in a couple other episodes. We'll come back talk about that in just a moment. But what do you have? What are your other chapters about?
So it's a focus in ISRAS, important shark and ray areas in the Indo-West Pacific, with a component of citizen science. Because
Okay.
something that I was discovering is, again, that a lot of these areas are reported by divers, by fishermen. So it links the importance of society in identifying these areas and the role that society has in preserving these regions, no? And goes back to that work because it's funny. I study marine biology because I didn't want to have anything to do with humans. I didn't like that much humans. I was also much more myself in nature.
Right.
But on the way, I discovered if I want to preserve nature, I have to work with people. People are, that's conservation. It's not about, you don't want to change the behavior of a species. You want to change the behavior of a human to preserve that
Right.
species. So I think that it makes all the pieces together to work, have a focus more in citizen science. And now it's a huge thing. I was reading the other day that we save millions, I don't know how many millions, I remember that, millions of dollars every year because of citizen science. And
Yeah.
many ISRAs are just based in that knowledge. And working with them helps to preserve those important critical habitats.
How do you collect the data for the citizen science, like for the reports? Is it through an app, or is it through like they email you, or is it through like the dive centers, or how's that done?
It varies a lot. There are very well established projects all around the world, but it's basically based in whale sharks and manta rays, no, the more charismatic species where people
Hmm.
go diving. There are very well established citizen science projects that have been like 10, 15 years. But there's also more informal. So most of the data that we gather comes from informal. It's more like
Gotcha.
ecological knowledge that people
Yeah.
gather through their lives and they pass through that. So we do validate that with pictures. Know that we know that's a species. It's not only your word. We need to prove that with pictures. But these days, everyone has a phone.
Mm.
No, so it's very easy to gather that information, and people do bring very interesting information. There's when we're working on the New Zealand and Pacific islands, there were these places where only divers, recreational divers, have been 4 times in their life. There's no
Mm.
research, nothing has, besides them, there's nothing. And those people were key to identify those areas. They go there and they see 100 sharks, probably because there's not even fisheries there. So it will be so expensive to get there, but divers are getting all over the world to go and dive. So
Nice.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very cool information that you gather.
yeah. Well, one of the chapters in your thesis was kind of a novel thing, in that this part of this project we'll talk about here that Adriana has been involved with me. But we went to one of the episodes on the Searching for Lost Sharks series on YouTube that we just launched. Is we went to Timor-Leste last year. I've talked to a couple on the podcast a little bit about it. We talked with Denise about it, but that was a completely unknown area. We just went and explored, and now you're going to work on one of your chapters for your thesis is going to be on that. Do you want
Well,
me to share?
it was your idea from the start.
That's true. That's
And,
true.
I'm new in this area. No, it's still the same problematic. No,
Mhm.
but then I was like, okay, I don't want to do all this space because all this information comes from this project.
Mhm.
But then they was like, oh, Timor Leste is like this unknown place, and it's an hour flight from where I live
Yeah.
in Darwin. And
Hmm.
actually, Timor Leste is very special because it's in the middle of one of the most diverse regions in the world for shark and rays. The two countries that report the highest numbers are Indonesia and Australia, and Timor Leste is just
Yeah.
in the middle.
It,
Right.
And they was like, and there's nothing. And I was, oh,
yeah.
that's like me.
Yeah. There you go.
For
I knew
us,
I knew who my go-to person was going to be on
Yeah.
that one. It sits right in the Coral Triangle. It's like one of the most diverse areas in the world, and nobody's ever gone there. And when I had a chance to go last year, I just like it's one of these. It was kind of an interesting thing because you ended up going to Australia, and then I ended up going to Australia, and I said, hey, what about let's go to check out Timor Leste and see if we can do something up there. And what do you know? Now it's going to be part of her thesis
I love
project,
it.
and I'll be
I
invited.
love it.
I, I say that because all you students listening out there, young people starting out, you wonder how things happen. Well, this is how something happens. It was somebody knew somebody that said, "Hey, Dave, why don't you go check this out?" And I'm like, "This should be a good thesis project. I know the perfect student I'm going to get for this project." So, uh,
But I think also just to go back to when you started at the beginning of like why you love nature so much and you're always going and hopping into adventures, like going to a place like Timor Leste that's not well known from a biological standpoint, especially in the ocean, it kind of takes someone who's adventurous to be like, "Hey, let's go to this place. Let's check it out. Let's see what we can find." And then ended up being part of your thesis because it's such an important aspect. And I think you're really going to scratch the surface when it comes to this in the future. And but it really goes towards your personality of let's jump in, feet first, and let's see what's going on. I mean, we've seen it throughout the entire episode where you talk about jumping into the water, you're taking, a small boat, for days at a time and not having washrooms and facilities, not an easy a boat ride. And then now going to Timor Leste, which is like, newly, explored by shark scientists now. So I think that's it's kind of a recurring theme in your story. I think we've seen, right?
Yeah, I'm super excited. It's going to be another level of challenge because I'm not from that place. I don't even know the language. I'm going to work with ongoing projects in that island. Collaboration for me is key, but I'm so eager. I'm going to start going into the field this year. I actually got a little good funding from Seversis Foundation, key
yeah,
to keep the project ongoing, and
Nice.
support from Charles Darwin University to start going onto the field and mostly work with a fisherman and a diving community. Those are the ones who are out there, and also, but work with ongoing projects. That's key.
yeah,
If I'm not from the area, I need to work with
Of
persons
course.
who
right.
already are working
And
there.
that
Yeah.
and that's super important. Let's talk about the series a little bit since we got onto this now. We had this was a Save Our Seas funded Keystone grant that I had to raise awareness of what I call lost sharks, these little known species that may be disappearing. And the first episode came out the end of January, and we had Denise Sotomayor, who's a friend and colleague of Adriana's, and I actually met Denise through Adriana, and she's been filming the series. And our first episode just kind of introduced the series, but the new episode, which has just come out, um, our first place we went to northern Peru, and then Ecuador, and we're looking for a shark that nobody has seen in over 60 years, and that's kind of the point of the project in the series on YouTube, is to raise awareness of these things that nobody's. Here's a species that we went to northern Peru and to Ecuador where this thing occurs, and we talked to the fishermen. Um, Adriano said none of the younger guys knew what the shark was at all, and only some of the older fishermen knew what it was, but the younger guys had no idea. And now you have this shark that's disappearing. And how do you feel? I mean, how do you think about that when you think about things like that, Adriana? Because this first was like right in your backyard in northern Peru,
Yeah.
and then we go to Ecuador, and it's going to be a two-part series for this episode. But how do you feel about like that?
I felt it was great to have you here. It was such an honor to bring Dave Ebert to Northern Peru, to the places that I've been working with. And we have such a good crew and good team with Adri Ceballos and Denise
Mm-hmm.
Sotomayor. From that perspective, it was great to work with such professional, passionate people. On the other side, it was kind of sad, no, to go to see this
Hmm.
shark that only the very, very old fisherman could identify. And they were saying, oh, but that shark, it was gone so many years ago. It was actually talking with a younger generation that were talking about other sharks that are gone that we're not
Mm-hmm.
even looking for. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was sad reality to watch what's going on. But I think the only way to make something a change, even it's little, you need to understand
Eh,
what's the reality and accept that and have hope
Yeah.
to change it.
Right.
That's what David's so good, because it puts you people into this uncomfortable place that we are
Yeah.
losing all species and we don't even know about them.
And I think a key part of the series too is like the first year, or the first episodes. The episode 2 and episode 3 is going to be in northern Peru and Ecuador, but having Adriana, who's with us today, and then we had Adriana Ceballos, who'll be on, uh, who's Ecuadorian, but having people, young researchers to work with to raise our awareness, because you're going to be, because like the people in northern Peru, the fishing communities there, through your book and stuff, and so it's going to be your people like yourself and Adriana Ceballos that are going to be able to kind of carry the torch, so to speak, to raise awareness with fishermen and with policymakers and others around there about these species that might be slowly disappearing. And after that, some of the upcoming series after that is as we just talked about, will be in Timor Leste, and Adriana managed to get her way into that project, which is I'm really excited about, um, to find out, because it's literally such a completely unexplored area. And then we'll have other episodes with Julia Constance, looking at river sharks, and Benaya Simone. Got a few really good episodes coming up in Indonesia. We're looking for some really rare species there, and again, all raising awareness there, for this project. And Save Our Seas has been super supportive of the whole project. And in fact, as Adriana just explained, she got funding for a small grant from Save Our Seas to now go back and focus on Timor Leste, which is it's just a completely open book as to what we'll find there. Um, so um, yeah, so kind of cool. I'm pretty excited about you going to Timor Leste, and looking forward to these other episodes. How did you feel about it? The
I feel super excited about what's coming up this year, because I have been working a lot on the proposal itself on the last year. So it will be amazing to be back on the field on a different continent, far away from home, but still super engaged. I think, I don't know, like in my life, I make decisions basically. If I don't do it, I will regret, even though I don't know
Yeah.
what the consequences are. Okay, let's do it. Because when I went diving on Antarctica 2 years ago, I say, of course, yes, Antarctica. But then I had my second panic attack when I was my first dive, and I was like, "What I'm doing diving in -2 degrees?" I could see like the seal, like a huge sea lion. Uh,
Yeah.
leopard
The
seal.
leopard seal.
I,
Leopard seal?
for me, the leopard seal was behind me, going to grip off my head. But then again, I don't regret it. It's an amazing experience. I could have my panic attack at that moment. It's those experiences that if you don't do it, it's just you need to stay alive. That's
Mhm.
what makes me move forward every single day.
Yeah, yeah. Is that yeah, that's pretty amazing. Well, obviously you're going to be doing that for part of your PhD thesis as well, and doing the research there. So this has been really awesome. Awesome. I knew you'd be an awesome guest to have on there, talk about this, and we're got to have you. Well, I'm going to have you back, talk about some of your more as you get to Timor Leste and some of these other projects some more. But uh, kind of kind of as we want to finish up this episode now, but what advice would you have for like a young person starting out? What kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, I once heard that not we are a few ones who get to find and follow our passion. I feel very grateful for that, and I know I'm kind of unique. A lot of people never find it or never pursue it. But what I could recommend is be curious. Like that's why I got into sharks. Is because I was curious. I put myself out there every summer that I have holidays from my university. I just went somewhere to do some volunteering, even if I don't get any money or something I have to put from my own pocket to do it. I did it. I will never forget, and I think that's how I got into finding my passion, because I was curious and I put myself out there. Like Denise also was saying, that just do it. Don't be afraid. Like you will regret. Like you have to just do it, and it will come to you eventually. I think so, but you need to be brave and just get out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's scary, then just do it. Of course, take your precautions, no one,
Hmm.
but just don't let that fear hold you back.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
I think the best thing that could happen is it's just you don't and find out your passion, and you just stay being very, I don't know, basic. So yeah, it is important to just be
Yeah.
curious and get out there, and don't be fall back by your
Yeah.
fears. I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
fear could be used as a source to get you out there. I try to do that, instead of
Yeah.
letting it hold me back. It's a way to push me forward. I think you can play
Hmm.
with fear in that sense very easily. Um, and yeah, I think all the amazing things that you can, like, if you told me that I was going to do my PhD in this part of the amazing part of the world with highest biodiversity, working in Timor Leste, again, not even in my wildest dream I would ever think about it. And one thing led to another, and for multiple years, it built up,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just go out there.
All
Don't be
right.
afraid.
That's great advice. Let's go. Well, thank you, Adriana, for coming on to the show, and I know we'll be having you back soon. And
Absolutely.
all the best to you. And uh, congratulations on your grant, or your Save Our Seas grant for Timor Leste. And anyway, great. Thank you again so much for coming on the show.
We appreciate it.
Thank you both for having me here. Have a great time with both of you, and I really admire your project, all your work that you are doing, and you're also a huge source of inspiration for me and for many people around the world.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana, for being on this episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. It was great to have you on. Dave, what did you think of the interview?
She was just what I thought, man.
Right?
She's a powerhouse. I mean, she really starts talking about stuff. She just sort of talks very much. Yeah, I did this, and I kind of pursued that. She talked about going out to sea and spending some of these little artisanal boats. Basically, it was five fishermen and her for 13 days, and there's no bathroom, no luxuries at all on the boat, and the guys were the nicest they could be
Unreal.
to her.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel a little. I know her parents a little bit, so I feel a little sorry for her parents. Particularly, her mom was probably aged a little more.
Yeah.
When her daughter was out at sea. But yeah, she's got that explorer gene.
Yeah.
And one of the things you'll see, people watch the series, you'll find people like Adriana and some of the other young researchers that we feature in the show. They all have the explorer gene. They really want to get out there and learn stuff, and they're going to places, going and doing things that most people would never consider doing. Going out to going out to sea for 13 days with 5 strangers, or going out, or even just going up to northern Peru, where nobody really studied sharks there before. She literally is like one of the first, almost like a young Eugenie Clark of Peru in a way.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was she made that point that she said, like, there was no role models. She said, well, there are no women
Yeah.
role models, but there were no really role models, period. There were no male. There were just simply no role models. So she's really, I think, with what she's doing with the young people in the communities there, I think she will be that sort of Eugenie Clark of Peru, I think.
I agree. I think she will have a name for herself within that area. She will become that role model. And I'm sure there are going to be a number of kids that grow up that read that book and want to do the same thing and follow her career. And I think what she's doing is fantastic, sharing her experiences and paving that way. We know it's not an easy feat. We've heard from a number of people who are doing that within their own countries. It's not an easy feat. There's a lot of hard challenges that she's gone through and that are ahead for her. But she's got that resilience that we've seen in a lot of other people, and you can just see it right now. She's going to definitely be a star and help out marine biology and shark science within Peru, and I think that's going to be great. We need more. Yeah. We need more of that around the world.
Right, and I think one other part of that is that she, because of all the international experience she's getting, she's in Australia now, and she's working on these ISRA programs. She could bring all that international knowledge back, locally, and that's really having that broader experience, and having someone who can share that's really going to be important, I think, in the future of shark and ray research in Peru. And I think that'll be really, really good. Peru, just a kind of aside, we've had a number of Peruvian researchers on there. They all happen to be women, but they have a really dynamic crew down there. And I've been very fortunate to get to know them and collaborating with them and mentoring. And they just, there's just a lot going on. It's one of those places that most people wouldn't think about. Peru, have all these people doing research down there, but it's quite an area. And as I say, there are a number of other people who've been very fortunate to highlight from South America and some of these different countries. And so I think that's, for me, I think in you, it's like being able to highlight some of these people like Adriana through this series. to reach people out there and let them know, hey, there's a lot of activity going on in these countries that no one really thought about. I think it's really great. I think certainly makes us feel kind of fulfilled in our mission,
Absolutely.
what we want to do in here. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And then, well, Adriana will be back. We're going to have her episode 3 just will be coming up. The episode 2 and 3 are both on Ecuador's lost shark, and Adriana will be back with Adriana Savalos in episode 3. And we'll have both on the podcast to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it'll be great. It's going to look, I'm looking forward to it. Also, just to the point that you've made a number of times too, is as Adriana's traveling from place to place, she's building her network. And so I think as she takes on students, when she goes back to Peru, if she decides to go back, she will be able to send them and have that network, like, hey, I've got a great student for you, whether it be in Australia, whether it be in the US. She's expanding that network. And I think that will help a lot of people get that international experience, bring it back to Peru, and that'll benefit the science community there, the marine science community, and shark science community. So I think that'll be really great. And we're gonna put all the social media followings that you can connect with to Adriana with in the show notes. And Dave, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do so?
It's Lost Shark Guy on Instagram, but really go to the YouTube channel, the Lost Shark Guy, and check out our series. We just episode 2 is out now. And check it out. Episode 3 will be out here in a couple of weeks. And check it out. I'm really where Andrew's been involved doing the editing of it. Denise Sotomayor, who's on the podcast, did the filming, and the 3 of us are super excited about that. And of course, I want a big thank you to Save Our Seas for supporting this project and really helping raise awareness of these lost sharks. And so we really so check out the channel. Instagram, on your Facebook, just look for Lost Shark Guy, and you'll find me in pretty much in all the social media platforms. So
awesome, perfect. And don't forget on Instagram, Beyond Jaws Pod, if you want to get a hold of us. And I want to thank Adriana for joining us, and Dave, thank you again for having these connections and being able to bring these wonderful people on to the podcast. And for you, the audience member who are listening to this and watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. From Dave and I, we want to thank you so much. Have a great day and happy conservation.